Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I wanted to talk to you about my gameplay impressions of Battlefield 1 from E3. I got to play the game, got a lot to talk about it, a lot of mostly good news to share as well, and a little bit of negative. You've probably already noticed that the gameplay is not my own, it's not unique, it's from the Battlefield livestream, which I did get permission from EA to re-upload. Unfortunately, I was not able to record unique footage of Battlefield 1 because of some communication mix-ups. It was a really hype event, there were 64 commentators there, it was pure chaos. I tried to get on, kinda last minute. I couldn't really get in touch with the right people, and there was a series of communication errors, and I basically didn't get to record any gameplay. But I did get to play the game for a good bit, and I wanted to talk about it. And I want to come right off the bat and say the game truly made me feel like I was in World War I more than any other Battlefield game, or really any other game has made me feel like I was part of combat in a very long time. I could have sworn that I was actually there in World War I, duking it out in that tiny little European town at the turn of the century, fighting in trenches, using old school guns, hitting people with shovels and tomahawks and axes and all kinds of crazy stuff. It really made me feel like I was there. And right when I thought the immersion was pretty good, the dynamic weather kicked in. In case you didn't hear, Battlefield 1 has dynamic weather. I think you can have sunny, rainy, foggy, and even snow in some maps. Well, in my turn, fog rolled into the map, and it reduced vision by maybe a third or a quarter, and it made it where nobody could tag anything. We're playing on PC, so a lot of people were just able to hit Q and tag enemies, and you know, the mini-map worked pretty well, but when you have no visibility, you can tag diddly squat. So the radar was useless, all the spawns got confused, the lines and the squad spawns and the objectives, everything turned into this big close quarters combat slugfest with shotguns and machine guns and bayonets, and I managed to actually kill somebody with both an axe and a shovel with different classes, and I truly felt the chaos of war. It felt like pure chaos, but that's what the dynamic weather is supposed to do. Now, of course, the weather rolled in and then rolled out, and we were able to continue with a normal tactical game, but it was a fun element, and I will say that the melee kills worked significantly better than they did in Battlefield Hardline. I thought Battlefield Hardline, especially when I was playing it at E3 and stuff, the melee kills were wonky, the weapons weren't very fun, and it didn't seem intuitive or worth using. It was very worth using and very easy to do in Battlefield 1, so if you get a chance, definitely go for the melees. I will say I missed my bayonet charges pretty badly. I didn't really know what I was doing with them, but it is fun to have the bayonet charges as an attachment because it is very satisfying to actually bayonet people. Now, one guy I did walk right up behind, and I basically charged straight into his back because I wanted to see the bayonet into the back of the lungs animation, but it's still fun to have them as attachments. And speaking of attachments and weapons, there were literally tons of guns available at E3. I think that there were 4 different types of weapons available for each one of the, I want to say 4 classes. So that's 16, which is a lot for E3. Each class also had 6 different grenades that they could use. You had anti-tank grenades, you had big grenades, you had tactical ones, you had gas grenades, smoke grenades, a whole bunch of different stuff. And since you have gas grenades, like mustard gas grenades, you had a toggleable gas mask. You just hit a key on the keyboard and drop your gas mask on so you didn't die to that. Thankfully, I did not. I was able to avoid the gas grenades. Each one of the weapons had several attachments and customizations you could put on it, and like all Battlefield games, you have 2 gadgets. This is a surprising amount of customization for World War I, and I kind of got the feeling that the devs got on Wikipedia and looked up every single weapon that was used in World War I and be like, okay, we're going to put that in there, and then they got a table of all the grenades and all the attachments and pretty much every bit of technology for World War I and just loaded it into the game. We're going to talk about the guns in another segment of this video because they handle very differently from previous Battlefield games, but next up, I want to talk about the graphics and the gameplay, and this is where we get some of the negatives. The graphics and gameplay are very similar to Battlefield 4, and I know that trailer that they came out with was absolute hype. It was really fun, it was really cool, but the game does not look or play like the CGI trailer. It especially doesn't look like it. I want to say the game still plays great, it's still very fun, and Battlefield 4 graphics are good graphics. Battlefield 1 has good graphics, but it does not look like the CGI trailer, so please scale your expectations down a little bit down to reality and expect it to look like a better Battlefield 4. It also had less bugs than the average DICE pre-alpha game, and that's, a little joke and it's a little knock on DICE, but Battlefield 4 was remarkably buggy on launch, unplayable on some consoles, a lot of issues on PC. Hardline had a lot of bugs, had a lot of issues, and they were under a lot of strain from developers. I feel like DICE really gets pushed by EA to push out these games faster than they really want to, so the joke is DICE releases pre-alphas. However, I will say Battlefield 1 at E3 had less bugs and more minor bugs than any other EA game that I've played recently, even on launch. Or I guess not EA, Battlefield game. Like, Battlefield 1 at E3 had less bugs than Battlefield 4 and Hardline on launch. And the bugs that were there were very minor, like animation goofs. There were a few clipping errors. Little things like I hop in a machine gun and the barrel's already shaking like it's shooting, but it's not playing the sound. And then I shoot once, it plays the sound and stops. It was a basic animation error. I had a little reload glitch. A dead body sinks through the ground because it clips through the floor. Very, very minor things that honestly didn't even impact my gameplay, so I was very impressed by that. Building destruction has returned big time, almost like Bad Company. Battlefield Bad Company is still like the premier standard for building destruction in Battlefield games, even though I know Battlefield 4 really pimped that. Bad Company, you could just blow out the floors of the building. If you didn't like the sniper in the building, you could just sink the whole thing. Some buildings were completely destructible, some had the framework. Bad Company had that going on. It was very, very unique. This is a mix of Bad Company and Battlefield 4, in my opinion. They have the big, destructible events like the blimp and some of the big buildings fall, you sink the windmill and stuff like that. But most of the smaller buildings with either heavy explosives or tanks and stuff, you could blow through the walls, you could run over the brick walls. Some of the smaller buildings you could completely level. A lot of them were more framework like Battlefield Bad Company, but destruction was back. In one instance, I saw a guy run into a building and hide, so as a tank commander, I just straight up blew up the wall, and then my second shot went into the building and killed everybody because it was easy to do. So very good on them for that. Now let's talk about guns, because guns, I feel, behave very differently in Battlefield 1 than they do in other Battlefield games, and that's because they're prototype weapons. These are the weapons at the very turn of the century. There was a lot of bolt action and, single shot and semi-auto. It's a surprising amount of fully automatic weapons for a World War I game, but I think that was done just to prevent it all being semi-auto slugfest. But the guns have a ton of recoil, and I want to say just right off the bat, they have significantly more recoil than Battlefield 4 or Hardline, and that would make sense because you would expect guns to have less recoil and become better, improved as they progress throughout the century. Aiming is more difficult too. A lot of the more old school guns have really crazy iron sights that don't always float my boat. And not only is it difficult to aim because of those things, but the devs, this is where me and the official press statement disagree. I feel, in my experience, that the bullet velocity and travel distance has been significantly decreased, especially on sniper rifles, but also for submachine guns and regular DMRs and that type of thing. I felt like I was truly needing to lead my submachine gun shots, even at relatively close range, and for the sniper shots, it was like I was basically doing, projectile physics in my head. I was aiming so far above people and trying to calculate the time and all that kind of stuff. Now, the official developer word is that they increased the muzzle velocity of almost every weapon because the older weapons were higher caliber and they did travel faster than most of our modern. They were fighting like gigantic bullets back in the day. And in a lot of ways, some of these older ones, like the Mosin Nagant, are arguably better than some of our modern assault rifles, at least when it comes to range and accuracy and that sort of thing. But it felt slow to me. It felt difficult to aim. Maybe it was the LAN setup. Maybe the PC was hot. Maybe I didn't know what I was doing. But I could have sworn that all of the bullets were significantly slower and required significantly more lead than previous Battlefield games. I'm not sure who's right, but I guess we'll find out when the game launches. Speaking of all this sort of stuff, let's talk about vehicles. The ground vehicles dominate a bit less than they used to due to lots of anti-vehicle grenades. Almost every class can have anti-vehicle grenades or some sort of anti-vehicle capacity if you want it. The map that we played had a lot of places to hide, so that was not an issue anyway. And most of the vehicles are very old school. They're not like the modern tanks that have 3 different machine guns and reflective armor and the giant, cannon, or the Hummer that people shoot out the side. The tanks were not as crazy. They didn't dominate as hard just because they're older, more prototypey weapons. And the biplanes are fun. I didn't get to use them very much at all. And of course, I had the issue with pilots that just didn't feel like piloting anymore and ejected while I was in the gunner seat. But I did fly them around a little bit. They move significantly slower than the jets in other Battlefield games, but they also stall easier, so you're still going to be doing the strafing run type deals. And I will say the airship was dope. It actually felt like a natural part of the game to have a giant Zeppelin come on, and you have to fight it with the Zeppelin. The Zeppelin has giant 50mm light machine guns and bombs and crazy stuff, and you can steer the Zeppelin around. If you want to, you can eject from your airplane and have a melee fight on top of the Zeppelin if you really want to, and all the little biplanes are fighting the Zeppelin, and there's other biplanes trying to shoot down the anti-Zeppelin biplanes, and it turns into this chaos. And the cool thing was that it crashed dynamically and stays on the map, so when you kill the giant Zeppelin, Zeppelin's probably about a fifth to a quarter the size of the entire map. When this thing finally dies, if you're able to kill it, it very slowly catches on fire and smashes into the ground and destroys every single thing it touches. Anybody that gets under that thing, friend or foe, completely dead. Any of the buildings in the way, regardless of if they were supposed to be permanent or not, completely blown away, obliterated, and it permanently scars and marks the map for the rest of the game. Not only does it do that, but the wreckage, all the crazy steel, because the Zeppelin is just, you know, or a blimp is just like huge steel beams encased in a very thin frame with helium in there. It has they just stay there. These giant, like, twisted, destroyed, burning steel beams and all the smoke, it stays on the map. And I had to fight it out inside the wreckage of the crashed Zeppelin, taking cover behind the steel beams and whatever's left of buildings, and it felt very, very cool, and it legitimately worked well. If you haven't noticed, I was very happy with Battlefield 1. Overall, I'm going to say Battlefield 1 played great. It looked good. Battlefield 1 did not look great. It looked good, just like a lot of the previous games, but hey, the scale is bananas, so that's fine. And it was easily the best new game I played at E3. I did get to play one game that was better, but it was actually an older game, and that's going to be talking about in a different video. But the game was nothing short of very, very good, so I'm really expecting a solid launch. I mean, I'm hoping for a launch with few bugs, and I'm also hoping for a launch that not only has what I experienced at E3, but that and an improvement. More maps, more horses, more crazy stuff, and I've just got big hopes for Battlefield, and I'm just really hoping that they don't push it out too early and don't disappoint me. Guys, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.